Good morning. Welcome. We're glad that you've joined us today. We are excited because we are gearing up for Relationship Refresh this weekend.
Yeah, a couple days away.
That's what's happening in our life. We're really excited. I hope you're going to join us. If you can't make it to this one, in the future, you could make it to another one because we're always doing something. There's always one coming up. In fact, there's one coming up in Ohio.
Yep, in August.
And it's a good opportunity for us to get to meet you and see you and interact face to face. So hopefully sometime you can join us for that. What are you gearing up for this week?
Well, you want to tell them where they can get tickets if they want to get tickets?
That is a good idea. So you can go to familymeeting.org/shop.
Yeah.
And then you'll find it under there, Relationship Refresh. I have learned how to do that myself.
Well done. You did it.
I am not techie, so usually I don't
know. But you're Star Trekkie.
No, that was my mom. My mom was a Trekkie.
Yeah.
She's kind of lost it a little bit.
Yeah, she had her birthday yesterday, and she finally grew out of it.
Happy birthday, Mom. Wait, her birthday wasn't yesterday. It was 2 days ago.
Oh, yeah, and she's what, 78?
No.
So she finally grew out of it.
She's 10 years younger than that.
Yeah, but no, because you're 40, and so that would make
I'm not 40.
That would make her...
I'm in my early 30s. 39.
Yep.
There are no late 30s. I'm going to go from my early 30s to 40.
Yeah. So.
Yes.
Plus my cousin's in town.
Yep.
Yesterday was his birthday.
Yeah. Now that's true.
So, had a great time.
Celebrated his birthday. I have never heard the word cuz so much in my entire life. Hey, cuz, you want to go there?
He's my cousin.
Up, cuz? Cuz all the time.
Yeah.
It's cute. It's really cute.
So we gave him the Florida experience. He's from Iowa and had never been here to this side before. He went to the Gulf side one time years ago. So took him to see the ocean, not the Gulf. Took him to see the ocean. We took him to Ichituckney Springs, which is quite a Florida experience to float down the springs. And then took him to Lake Apopka Wilderness Drive to see alligators in the wild.
Mm-hmm. And then he had a beach day where he swam in the ocean with the waves and experienced like them slapping you in the face.
Yeah.
It was kind of fun in and of itself. So
I have some meetings today, but I think I'm going to try to take him to the beach at least for a little while today.
Oh, that's nice.
So he's going to go home in a couple days, but giving him a good vacation Florida experience while he's here.
Yep. That's what's going on in our lives. We like to hear from you, though. What's going on in your life? Okay, we'll wait for the comments. We should record the podcast.
All right, let's do this.
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah, but you have to start. I'm trying to drink my coffee.
I know, but you're like gulping.
Oh, I know. I need to drink quieter. I don't know how to drink quieter. And it's hot, so. Okay.
Like burning yourself?
Yeah, I'm burning myself. But I want the coffee because I'm tired.
Gather round, everybody. It's time for a family meeting. The Family Meeting is a show that's all about family relationships. We're the Osterkamps. I'm Thomas, and this is my wife, Lysandra. The loud gulper.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Hello.
Who swallows really loud? Careful.
Hello and welcome to our family. Welcome to episode 198 of the Family Meeting Podcast. On today's episode, we are going to talk about a very heavy topic. And it's one that we don't take lightly, and neither should you, but I think it's a really relevant topic, and we're going to explain why. We are going to talk about children cutting themselves. We chose this topic because it became very relevant to our family when one of our girls' friends shared with her that she had been cutting herself. And we had to figure out, okay, what are we going to do to help our daughter, to help this girl? How do we handle this new situation and navigate it? And then the very next day, or it was maybe the next week, it was like right after that, a parent friend of ours confided in us that they had figured out that their daughter was cutting herself. And we immediately were like, this is happening. Like, this is real. And we need to talk about it. So we're going to share what we did to guide our daughter, help her friend, and how we tried to be helpful and encouraging to our friends. We also want to share what we've learned since then about this subject.
All right, before we jump into that, though, we are just a couple days away from Relationship Refresh. People are getting their tickets ordered. I want to encourage you to get your ticket order. That would be familymeeting.org/shop. And for just $25 for the couple. So you don't need to go on there and buy a ticket for you and your spouse. It's $25 per couple. So that's just $12.50 a person. And we're going to be having some great conversations. It's going to be similar to what we do with the podcast, except for you're going to have opportunities to practically have some discussions with your spouse. We're going to help you be able to do that. But you can also ask questions, interact live. I think it's with other couples and with us. It's going to be a great time. So I want to encourage you to be here and to get your tickets today.
Absolutely. And I have another thing that I'm kind of looking forward to, honey.
What's that?
And we didn't really talk about this much, but today is episode 198.
Yeah.
We are only a couple episodes from episode 200.
Yeah, and we're going to do something special for 200. Lysandra's going to take the day off, and it's going to be just me on the podcast.
That will be very special.
So, look forward to that special episode. Guys, I got some things to tell you that I can't get smacked for in that moment.
Yeah, but you will later. Yeah, but we're excited about episode 200. We do have something special for you. It's actually special, by the way. It's not what he just said.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into our topic for today, even though it is kind of a difficult thing to talk about. You may even be thinking, this isn't an issue that applies to me or my family. Cutting, I've never seen my kid do it. My kids are maybe really young. Maybe my kids are out of the house. This isn't something I did. Like, how is this relevant to me? But recent studies have found that about 17% of adolescents and some, like even college students, 15% of college students have engaged in some form of self-injury. And another study that I read said that it was 20%, 1 in 5 teens does this.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, a lot of these are estimates because so much of it goes unknown.
Exactly.
Right, in secret that's never found out about. So they're doing their best to guess, but that's probably pretty close to accurate, if not a little higher.
Yeah, I would think it could be higher than this. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so chances are somebody that you know is having this struggle, whether it be a grandchild, a niece, a nephew, a friend, one of your own children or their friends. So it is something that's good to kind of just be a little bit educated on and to maybe know exactly what to do if you see something and how to handle that.
So let me start off by asking you this question. Have you ever all in your life tried to harm yourself?
I've never did the cutting. The cutting was not something that I ever did. After we got married, like during pregnancy and after giving birth and stuff, I think it was actually, I don't know if it was during pregnancy. It might have been. I think it was after. So I think it had to do with postpartum depression. I just didn't know it at that time. I would like bang my head against a wall to punish myself for not being a good wife or a good mom. And I would pull my hair out. Now, this didn't happen all the time, but I had like these like fits of like rage and I would try to punish myself.
Which were some scary moments in our household.
Yeah, they were. I thought that that's how I was going to be for the rest of my life. And I think you did too.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it was very much hormonal and baby related. Now looking back, I understand that, but I definitely didn't know it then.
And it wasn't like it was an ongoing thing, or I would have really sought out some sort of help to taking you to get some sort of help.
Mm-hmm. They were kind of a few isolated incidents.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Very, very sporadic.
Mm-hmm. All right, what about you?
So I did when I was a teenager, and we'll probably get into more of the reasoning behind all, why this happens, why kids do this. So I won't dive much into that, other than to say that the self-harm that I was involved in really was it was an effect of the sexual trauma that I'd gone through. And so we'll dive into some of the reasoning behind that, but I was involved in it, and it was a direct correlation of something else that was going on, which just leads me to say this, and we may repeat some of this stuff as we get into the episode. But it's typically a sign that there's other issues at play, and so if you notice something taking place, whether it's your child or somebody else's child, it is something to take serious and to do a little bit of investigating of what's going on in their life, the emotions and everything else. If there is some trauma, or it's just they're having a hard time just dealing with all the changes and things that happen in that moment of life. So I'm well aware of this topic with the personal experience I have, and the reason for people to be involved in self-harm is probably widespread, but there'll be some common denominators along the way between them, but we'll dive more into that. So we talk about understanding this like from a personal level, but also with people surrounding us. So when you look at those statistics, like I said, it's probably a lot higher than what they're reporting, but and there is this misconception that self-harm means the teenager is suicidal, and these behaviors are different but related. While most people who harm themselves don't intend to commit suicide, there can be a high link with suicide if the behavior goes untreated. So just because your child or another child is involved in self-harm doesn't mean they want to die.
Right.
Or doesn't mean they're trying to kill themselves. So I know for me, it was basically a physical distraction from the inner turmoil that I was feeling. So it gave my mind something else to concentrate besides all the ugly feelings I was feeling because of what had happened to me. So I never wanted to die. Like, I was never suicidal. It was more about a distraction than anything.
You understand that now, but in the midst of it, you had no idea that was what was happening, right? Like, you were just simply cutting yourself.
No, I think I totally understood.
You did?
Yeah.
And did you even know that it was related to that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and so that's the thing. It's not necessarily about just them wanting to die or wanting to end their life. But the single largest category for non-suicidal self-injury is cutting. And so that's going to be the most prevalent self-harm that you're probably going to see or be involved in. And this could be cutting themselves with razors, knives, shards of glass, scissors, other sharp objects.
Yeah, so it's not even like you can just be like, well, I'm going to make sure there are no knives in their room.
Right,
That's
exactly.
not going to take care of it because they'll use whatever they can get a hold of.
Exactly.
So when this first kind of came into our lives in a very personal way, one of our daughters came to me weeping, and I dropped everything. What's going on? What happened? Are you okay? What's going on? And she could barely talk because she was weeping so deeply. And she said, she finally just gave me her phone. She gave me her phone, and I read the text from between her and her friend. And her friend shared with her that she had been cutting herself. And she said, Mom, I don't know what to do. What do I do? What do I tell her? And I was so proud of her already because the first thing that our daughter texted her friend was, you need to tell your mom. And I was so proud of her. I was like, you did a great job. This is exactly what you should have done. I'm really proud of you. Good job. It's going to be okay. We're going to help her,
Well, and not just texting her to tell her mom, but when her friend was in danger, she told a trusted adult.
Yes.
She was able to tell you what was going on, which is exactly the things that we teach our children to do, and it's part of the process that you need to be doing in your family meetings and your conversations with your kids is learning to tell trusted adults in their life of when something's going on, whether it's in their own life or life of somebody around them.
And a lot of building that trust is keeping the lines of communication open with your kids frequently. So we don't only talk when there's a disaster, but we talk all the time. We talk about everything. And then also when they do share something deep, secret, you keep their secrets, unless obviously like you can't and you need to get them help. But, and also not overreacting when they tell you things. And this promotes future trust. Later on, they will tell you the other things that are happening. So that's something you can work on when your kids are really little.
Well, and making sure that they understand in that whole process about breaking trust is there are certain things where information has to be passed along. And so this is one of those things where, hey, we're going to contact the other parents to let them know what is happening. The best thing is for the child to tell their parents. And so that's the avenue, but making sure our children know, hey, when it comes to people's personal safety and things like that, like we have to pass on information to the important people in their lives so that when that happens, they don't feel like we've broken their trust either. Like they know that right up front, this is exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah. So I kind of guided and helped my daughter through her texting with her friend, talking about like trying to encourage her to tell her mom. I can't remember if I called or texted, but I talked to the mom right away and told her what had happened.
I'm guessing you called. That's not really something you would text.
I probably did call. I can't remember right now. But, and I was so impressed with how the mom handled it as well. She is a great mom. She said, okay, thank you, and then she said that she was going to wait and let her daughter tell her.
Yeah.
And so, but she also didn't do nothing either. She created opportunities for her daughter to tell her. So like she spent some alone time with her. She did some special things, just the two of them. She asked her questions. And eventually the girl did tell her mom and shared it with her. So that way her mom could help her without feeling like our daughter had betrayed her trust.
Yeah.
So it was really good. And the thing that's positive about that too is then this girl will feel comfortable talking to our daughter again if there's something in the future. And so understanding like that you don't have to necessarily say like, so-and-so told me you were doing this, and I thought it was handled so beautifully and this girl got the help she needed. And so that was really neat. But that's kind of where all this started with us. And then a dad came to you, right, about this a couple of days later. I think the dad came to you and then me and the mom talked as well. But
yeah.
But there was another friend of ours that they had found that their daughter had been doing this. And so we just kind of tried to pray with them and give them some suggestions on where they could go to get help.
And so here's what I love about that story about that girl is they're able to get help from both directions because of the discretion and everything that was played out from both sides. Like, hey, you need to talk to your mom, and encouraging as a friend to get the information out there, but also being able to share with the mom and her having the discretion to set aside some time and make an opportunity for her daughter to share. So you instead of coming at them and them shutting down, now you're able to actually foster an atmosphere where she can work through her issues, she can get help, and all those sorts of things. So it was definitely a good moment, how all that played out. It doesn't always play out like that. But when you've got cool, wise heads involved, and sometimes that's hard to do, especially when you're dealing with your own child. It's a very emotional thing. Yeah, because you're scared.
Yeah. And I think as soon as you see any cuts, and a lot of times it's on the arms, you see those cuts and you immediately think they're trying to slit their wrists. Like, my child is trying to kill themselves. Like that, I feel like for me anyway, that is the immediate 0 to 60. Like, I go right away. You might not, because you understand what cutting is and what it isn't. I didn't. So I think that's how I would panic. But,
Yeah.
It's good to just take a step back, take a breath, pray, and then go from there.
So, cutting and other common forms of self-injury are mostly used for emotional regulation. And that's kind of the what I was feeling as well is, hey, I just need, to shut off this emotional stuff that's happening, let my brain distract on something else. But it's done through deliberate and intentional damage to the body. Those who self-harm usually do so because they feel their emotions are very powerful, or they don't have the capacity to tolerate their distress, which is exactly what I was feeling with everything that had happened to me. I didn't know how to tolerate. I didn't know how to process, what was happening. And so this was a way that I could try to work through and process everything that was happening.
And am I correct in saying that you did not feel like you had an adult you could talk to?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Or even a friend?
Yeah. No, not really.
You didn't have the kind of friend that you could have told this to?
No. I don't. No. Not people that I thought would understand. And I didn't, when you're going through stuff like that, you don't fully understand it yourself, which is why, we talked about this on other episodes that are specifically dealing with sexual trauma. A lot of times it doesn't come out till years and years and years later, if at all, because, it takes a long time to process what happened to you. Mm-hmm. But there are sensitive individuals who frequently feel things more intensely than their peers and are often very self-critical. And so they're just trying to, like we said, they're not trying to end their lives. They're just trying to figure out a way to process what's happening to them. They feel like they can't control or deal with the emotions or the events that are taking place. And so this is their way of trying to gain control and trying to process.
Mm-hmm. And it can be that self-criticalness. It can also be self-loathing. And I think, like, when I was going through my postpartum stuff and I was hurting myself, for me, it was self-loathing. Like, I could not stand myself. I hated myself. And that I can identify. But oftentimes it's cutting themselves that produces this sense of calmness. Injuring oneself makes a person feel better. And they've also kind of come to figure out that a small percentage of teens use self-injury for avoidance or to create the distraction from their feelings and problems. And many are dealing with emotional pain or difficult situations and nobody else knows about them. And this is their way of dealing with it. Maybe it's the pressure to be perfect or to live up to impossible standards, their own standards or someone else's.
Yeah.
But these are all things that can cause some teenagers unbearable pain. And of course, as we talked about, it can be college students and even up into the 30s. They've found that people will do the self-harm. But some have been deeply hurt by harsh treatment or sexual abuse or other kinds of abuse that have left them feeling unsupported, powerless, unworthy, unloved. And this is something that they do. So we want to help you to understand the why behind it, because that's a really important element of helping the person.
Yeah, and also many teens describe the sense of relief they feel as they cut or self-harm, which was true of me, feeling that sense of relief. And this is common with compulsive behaviors. Some people believe that endorphins might add to the relief teens describe when they self-injure. And endorphins are the feel-good hormones released during intense physical exertion. And they can be released during an injury as well. So cutting and other self-harm can become a teen's habitual way to respond to pressures and unbearable feelings. And so this could be this ongoing thing. This is why they have some people who are doing this, well on into their 30s after they've grown and matured and do have the tools to be able to deal with the situations. It can almost become addicted, and that's what some say, they feel addicted to their behavior, but that's because with these endorphins, we've kind of trained ourselves, right, to get that sort of a rush. And this is true of any addiction, whether you're talking about drugs, alcohol, pornography, or whatever else. And there are some who would like to stop, but don't know how or feel they can't. And then if there are other teens who they don't want to stop. But once it's become like an addictive behavior, you really have to have help to be able to stop that, because it's not just about the initial thing that got them starting. Now this has become a full-blown addiction.
Yeah. So we've talked about how some teens will do this because they want to relieve pain or be distracted from other emotions and stuff. But it's also been reported that some teens do this because they feel numb or empty inside. And so they use the self-injury to create emotions so that they feel something. Even if it's negative, they want to feel something. So that can be something behind it as well. But self-harm is often linked to or part of another mental health condition. And as Thomas talked about, it can also be related to trauma, something that has happened in their life. And these are the things that we have to get down to the bottom of when we're trying to help them. But some teens who have this situation where they're cutting themselves, they're dealing with other urges, obsessions, or compulsive behaviors. It could be depression, bipolar disorder, or other issues, mental health issues, overwhelming moods that they can't regulate. For others, it can be like real mental health conditions that need medication and counseling and things. So it's really important to figure out what is behind this, because some have, hurt and anger and despair, and they don't know how to cope with these things, or it can be a chemical imbalance that we need to help them with.
Many teens also use self-injury to punish themselves because they feel they do not deserve to live, breathe, or take up space. And I just think about that phrase right there, the feelings that they have, and it's so heartbreaking. To know that there are people who that is what's going through their mind, that is what's going through their thoughts and their feelings. And so what they'll do is they may cut or otherwise injure themselves in the context of an extreme emotional situation. Bless you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Like other risky behaviors, it can be dangerous and habit forming. In most cases, it is also a sign of deeper emotional distress. So it's one of those things where I said earlier, if you see any signs of this, you dig a little bit deeper, because it's not just about that mark on their arm, or those marks on their arms or their legs or whatever. There's a lot going on inside of that child. In some cases, though, peers can influence teens to experiment with it. So cutting often begins as an impulse, but many teens discover that once they start, they do it more and more and can have trouble stopping. Many teens who self-injure report that it provides a sense of relief from deep, painful emotions. Because of this, it's a behavior that tends to reinforce itself.
Now there's a small group of people who do think about suicide if they're cutting themselves, and they discover that once they try to commit suicide and maybe they fail at it, they discover, okay, I don't really have to kill myself. I can cut myself, and this makes me feel better. And you may be thinking to yourself, how could a parent not know that their child was cutting themselves? What kind of parent doesn't know that? And you may think, oh, self-harm would be easy to detect. Like these parents who find out when their kid's been doing it this whole time, or like in your case, I believe your parents had no idea. And if they listen to this podcast, this is when they will find out.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So the thing is, it's not really easy to detect. So don't condemn these parents who don't know. Okay. Most teenagers who are engaging in self-injury hide their injuries. And they would cut or burn shoulders, ankles, abdomen, thighs, areas that are usually covered by clothing. And I know you definitely weren't trying to get attention for it.
No.
So we were teenagers, and I remember you had cuts on your arms. Mm-hmm. And I asked you about the cuts. Do you remember that?
Yep.
Do you remember what you told me?
No.
I do, because I totally bought it. You said that you had been mushroom hunting with your dad in the woods, and you got scratched by a bunch of thorns. Do you remember telling me that?
Sure.
No, you don't. Yeah, and I was like, oh man, that was a lot of thorns. Like, I believed you. I mean, granted, I was a young teen girl, but these teenagers will come up with something. Like, they're trying to hide it, and a lot of times it's with clothing.
Yeah, but this is something to think about as well, is to notice your kids and what their regular patterns are. Mm-hmm. So I think about my own daughters, and I don't notice a lot about what people wear. But each of my kids, like, they have a usual, mm-hmm. right, of how they dress or whatever else. I may not be able to tell you what color it is, if there's words on it, right? But I know how each of my daughters basically are. And so if all of a sudden there is a drastic change, now I may not, because I just don't notice clothing. I may not notice clothing. Now you would notice clothing right away.
I would notice right away. I'd be like, what happened?
But this is the thing, is trying to pay attention.
Yeah.
To know your kids enough to know if something changes. For mm-hmm. instance, if you've got a child who is wearing tank tops all the time or short sleeves all the time, and all of a sudden it's July and they want to wear long sleeves. Mm-hmm. Like, that's something that is different and out of the ordinary. Mm-hmm. It would be like if you never wear turtlenecks and you got a boyfriend and all of a sudden now you're wearing turtlenecks. Like,
there's hickeys on that neck, guys. There's hickeys.
Exactly. So there's some sort of, like, this is not the norm. All of a sudden there's a change. You want to pay attention to that.
That's right. Now, this doesn't mean, and I'm glad that he's pointing out that this is a drastic change, because we all have teenagers who want to wear sweatshirt hoodies all the time.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And you're like, you're sweating buckets. The sun is out. We're outside. Why are you wearing a sweatshirt hoodie? Like, what are you doing? But that's their norm.
Yeah.
So, and you also see them without it, and you know that there's no cuts, right? So we're not saying every teen who's wearing a sweatshirt in the summer is cutting themselves. So don't necessarily go around and start like lifting up the sleeves. You know?
Yeah.
That's not necessarily the case. But if it's a change, like if they normally would be wearing comfortable clothes in July and now they're wearing the sweatshirt, that's an indication.
Yeah. So it could be a sign that they're concealing a cut, a burn, a bruise, or whatever. The majority, okay, so I'm going to say the majority, because you will have mm-hmm. some who they're looking for attention. A majority of teens aren't looking for attention when they self-harm.
Right.
Instead, the act of self-injury gives the teenager relief from emotional distress. So it's about them. It's not about anybody else. They don't want attention from it. They do it to make themselves feel better. This is not to signal parents and friends that they need help, mm-hmm. although it is a signal.
It
is.
If
you notice, it is a signal that they need help. But they're not doing this for attention to get help. Like, right. They're not trying to signal you at all. They're just trying to work their way through whatever it is they're dealing with at that time. Mm-hmm. And so, it is, that's why it can, though, be harder to detect.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I shared already what happened with Thomas and I when we were teenagers, and I noticed his cuts. So let's just say you, as an adult, you see repeated cuts on a teenager. And when you ask about the cuts, you hear excuses like, oh yeah, my cat got it. Or, oh, I scratched myself. Or I was mushroom hunting with my dad's in the woods and I went through a bunch of thorns. They're going to be, it's an indication that it could be that they are covering up self-injury. So definitely you want to keep an eye on that and the injuries and how it progresses. But a lot of times there's a sense of like shame and secrecy that goes along with it. And most of them are going to try to hide the cuts. But if they are noticed, they're going to make excuses about them. So I hate to say it, but don't necessarily believe the first excuse. Okay. Dig a little deeper, as Thomas said.
So let's talk about some signs to watch for, because it may not be as easy to spot. Mm-hmm. Because once again, it's not about getting attention. So what are some things that we can watch out for? First of all, pay attention to your child's moods. Mm-hmm. And you may think, well, they're a teenager.
They're just one big mood.
Exactly.
I know. There are times when Thomas and I, and I'll share this with you guys because anybody who has teenagers is going to relate to this. There are times when we do something really nice for our kids. Like we do something where we're spending money on them. We're taking time off.
This happened recently.
Yeah. We're like on family day, we're doing nice things for them and they treat us like crap. And I texted Thomas. We're sitting next to each other, but I texted him and I'm like, can you believe the way that she's treating us right now when we're doing this for her? And he's like, I know, right? But now we were also being sensitive because we knew that she was dealing with some other stuff. But it's like teenagers and their moods.
Yeah.
And of course, 5 minutes before, she was fine. And about 10 minutes after, she was fine also.
Yeah.
But a rough 15 minutes.
Paying attention, though, to this goes back to what they're wearing as well. It's just paying attention to your child and understanding what are some norms for your children and what they're going through. So, but if your child comes home in a bad mood, that might not necessarily be like a sign, because that could just be them, right? And so, but what if this happens? They come home in a bad mood. He locks himself in his room for a short time and then emerges in a far better frame of mind. Okay, so this could be a sign that the teenager engaged in self-harm, especially if the child is prone to emotional displays. So
yeah, and as a parent, I wouldn't even think of that. Like, I would be like, oh, she went into her room and prayed and got right with the Lord and came back out.
Yeah,
like, I'm just totally oblivious to this stuff, and this is why these conversations are so good. Like, they kind of open your mind to like look for the things you need to look for.
So it doesn't mean that's happened, right? But it's a sign that it could be happening. Mm-hmm. So whatever had him upset, he was able to go in his room, got the relief from harming himself, and then came out and he felt better because of what he had done. So it's just paying attention to things like that, paying attention to your child's moods, paying attention to their behaviors and things like that. Knowing your child in everything that we talk about, whether it's, we have people often ask us about, how to protect your child from sexual abuse or whatever else, and just all the stuff. The number one thing is just knowing your child and paying attention to your child.
And the only way to do that is to be present. You can't be on your phone all the time. You can't be working all the time. You have to be present in their life. You have to be engaged in order to know them. But as you pay attention, to those things, even if they don't want to reveal arms and legs anymore, and it's hot outside, just all those different things that can signal you that something is going on. Pay attention to those things. Now, what if you see the cut? What if you're like, that's not a cat scratch. We don't have a cat. And they have cut themselves. Here's your first step. Write this down. Get out your pen and paper. Write this down.
Pen and paper, what year is it?
Get out your notepad on your phone, open your laptop, write this down. First step is don't overreact.
Yeah, which can be so tough.
It is.
Because you just love your child so much, and it's just like, it's a shocking thing.
Yeah, and it's very upsetting. But I would say this, and this is probably my advice to most parents. The first step in every parenting situation is don't overreact. That's your first step in all situations with parenting. Don't overreact. Relax. Take a break. Take a deep breath. Put your trust in the Lord. But it is important to have an open-minded, non-judgmental approach and validate your child's emotions. And then this can help lead to that open, constructive dialogue, conversation about the issue that's happening. So if you just see that it's happening and you're like, stop it, what are you doing? What could possibly be so wrong in your life that you would want to do this? I'm getting rid of all the scissors and all the knives. And you just like freak out on them. And all you're trying to do is get them to stop. You're not helping your child at all, because the goal is not to get them to stop. The goal is to help them understand their emotions and deal with them in a healthy way. Cutting is an unhealthy way to deal with emotions. So we want to teach them and guide them on how to deal with their emotions in a healthy way. But you cannot do that if you overreact and freak out.
Yeah.
So that's the first step.
It can be hard though, because it's so shocking. You see the physical harm they're doing, and then also you understand that's a sign of the emotional turmoil or whatever else that's happened in their life, so you're wondering what in the world. So,
and I think then there's that very quick next thought that comes into your mind, and that is, I failed as a parent. Like, if I was a better parent, or if I was watching better or whatever, this would never have happened. And I think a lot of times then we can take that on ourselves.
Yeah, but that having that self-control to just remain calm will go a long way in being able to help your child work through whatever it is they're trying to work through. But here's the next step, and that is to get help. And this can be hard for some parents because it can be embarrassing, like the fact that, hey, my child's struggling, and we kind of take it on ourselves, like Lysandra said, that we're not a good parent, we're not doing a good job, or whatever else. But honestly, it's not about you. It's about whatever it is your child's trying to work through. So I know it can be difficult to get help, to admit that there's things going on that you are outside of your control. But it's important to assess whether the behavior is being done to manage their feelings, or if the intent is to commit suicide. And so if it's determined that the behavior is non-suicidal, their primary care doctor should help get in touch with a therapist.
Yeah, because I think a lot of parents are like, okay, my kid needs help. How do I get them help? Where do I find a therapist? Who do I get help from? And all of you moms, or maybe it's dads who's taking their kids to the doctor, when you go and you get their annual sports physical or whatever it is, the doctors always ask them these questions. How many times a week do you feel depressed? How many times a week do you feel like you're not worth it, you're worthless? Or how many times a week do you feel anxiety? I don't know. There's a bunch of questions that the child or teen has to answer every single time they go to the doctor. And the purpose of that is so that if it's a lot and if the child is struggling, then the primary care doctor can lead you as a parent and the child to help. That is part of what they do, because they're looking for health for your child physically and mentally. And so that's a good place to start if you're looking for a therapist for your child.
So just understanding, talking about trying to figure out if it's non-suicidal, or if the intent is there to end their lives, the nature of the injuries, how severe, and all those sorts of things. And then the thing is, someone highly trained and who has a track record of treating adolescents with self-harm behavior. And there are a lot of directions therapy can go, but ultimately the goal is to help your child regulate emotions and thoughts by improving coping skills. And so there are people in your life, your doctor will be able to help you find a therapist. Most likely your pastor can, if you're involved in a church. If your pastor doesn't know, then he probably knows other pastors who do know. So, for instance, we had a situation where a parent reached out because of their child harming themselves. We've been here just a couple of years. I didn't know a therapist yet who this was, dealing with things like this is what they do all the time. So I just reached out to the group of pastors that I'm connected to in our area and said, hey, who do you guys use? Who do you recommend? And within a couple of minutes, I had a couple good recommendations that I could pass along. And so you may not know, and that's okay. Your doctor will have some good ideas. If you're a Christian, you're looking for a Christian, then your pastor will know somebody, or he'll know people who know somebody. So, you've got to reach out and get the help.
Mm-hmm. And we want to leave you with this today. Keep the lines of communication open with your child. Okay. The lines of communication thing starts when they're little. So you may be listening to this episode and you're like, I don't have teenagers. I know it's coming and I'm terrified of the teen years. I know I was. Start right now when they're little and work on the communication. Help make your child comfortable talking to you. If they are comfortable talking to you, then when these kinds of things happen, they're going to talk to you because they're already comfortable talking to you. It's really important. And you may be a parent who's not real talkative. You may be a parent who would prefer just to sit in silence like we talked about last week. And that's okay, but you're going to have to work a little at this because you want to be the person your child goes to. And you also want to be the person who they can trust if you see it in them and you want to talk to them about it, where they're not going to shut down, but they're going to be open to listening to you and to having a conversation about it. So start right now, whatever your age of your children, start right now with working on talking about everything, talking about deep things, talking about how they're feeling, and you sharing how you're feeling and what's going on in your life. That will help them talk to you. That's where it really starts.
So family meeting tonight, we would just want to have a conversation about self-harm, about regulating emotions. And the earlier you can start to have these conversations with your children, the better off that you'll be in the long run. Now, obviously, if you have toddlers, there's things you're not going to talk about. But you can start to have conversations with them about their feelings and how to share those feelings with you, those frustrations and whatever else, in a way that is beneficial and that they understand. You know your child, right? So you know what level of conversation you can have with them. But having a conversation about self-harm and how to get help dealing with these emotions. So you're just kind of making it a part of conversation. And if you're having regular conversation with your kids, like Lysandra said, then, that makes it easier in the long run. It's not weird when all of a sudden, what feels like out of the blue, you're having a conversation about self-harm, whether it's your child or their friend. You're working to develop those lines of communication. So when something happens, your son can come to you and say, hey, my friend just told me, and I'm worried. What can we do? Or, your daughter can come to you and say, you know what, I'm having these feelings that we talked about, like where I don't like myself, where I don't feel worthy of taking up space. I need some help. And so it's a hard conversation to have when you're talking about self-harm and you're talking about these very powerful emotions. But it's a necessary conversation to have because we want to keep those lines of communication open. Your children are going to go through times where they feel very intense, very powerful emotions. That is part of growing up, part of all the changes biologically and everything else that they're happening. We want them to know that when they have these emotions, they can come to us. And we're going to listen, we're going to care, and we're going to try to help them through it.
Thanks for joining us today. Please go and subscribe to the Family Meeting Podcast from your favorite podcast provider. And if you found this information helpful, please share this episode on social media and invite your friends and family to listen in with you.
To find more content and information Lysandra and I provide, you can go to our website, familymeeting.org, or email us at info@familymeeting.org. If you'd like to shoot us a text or call us, you can send a voice message at 904-257-3062, and we'll answer those questions on the air. Future episode.
And we want to invite you to join us for our next family meeting. We are going to talk about something really fun. I'm excited about this episode. We're going to talk about your empty nester bucket list. Now, You might be thinking, I'm not an empty nester. Then this episode is for you, because this is an episode that's going to be what you are looking forward to as a couple when the kids are out of the house and things that you want to do. We're going to talk about dreaming about that.
Buy a charger. Not a phone charger either.
A car. That's going to have to be a while after the kids move out.
Hey, we get rid of one and we can afford it.
Yeah. And the thing that's good about talking about this is it can help you invest in your relationship now so that when the kids are gone, you'll have something there to work with between you and your spouse.
Thanks for joining us today for this family meeting. Have a great week, everybody. This meeting is adjourned.
Yeah, it is. All right, so today was a tough topic and it was pretty heavy, but maybe you have some experience in this and we'd love to hear from you if maybe you have personally gone through this, or maybe you have a child or a child's friend. Share with us your experience and how you helped that person, and it could be a big help to somebody else.
Most definitely. Thanks for joining us today.
Bye-bye.